Content objective, Unit 1, Geography Skills. Why are different places similar? Specifically explain how spatial analysis uses the measures of density, distribution, concentration, and diffusion to find similar patterns. Your ICANN statements for Key Issue 3 in your textbook are 1. Give examples of change in economy and cultural occurring on global and local scales. 2. Identify and explain 3 properties of distribution across space. Specifically, use the key terms density, concentration, and pattern. 3. Describe different ways in which geographers approach aspects of cultural identity, such as gender, ethnicity, and sexuality. 4. Describe the characteristics of expansion and relocation diffusion. Explain how phenomenon can spread across space over time through different forms of diffusion. 5. Explain how places are connected through networks and how inequality can hinder connections. And 6. Explain how densities can vary based on different scales of maps. As we go back to some of the concepts or key terms we talked about in Key Issue 1, scale, space, and connection, remember, geographers use all 3 of those key terms to explain similarities amongst places and regions. Remember, scale is the relationship between a portion of Earth to the Earth as a whole. Space is the distance between point A and point B. And the connection tells us how one place is relative to another. So again, those are the concepts that we use to explain the difference and similarities between places and regions. When we look at scale and we look at globalization, globalization is a force or an action or a process that shrinks the world. It doesn't shrink it in size of the globe or the size of the earth, but it shrinks the world because now we're connected with a global economy and we're connected with communication networks. Take social media, for instance. The connection is almost instantaneous and it can connect from one part of the globe to the next. In other words, from the Western Hemisphere to the Eastern Hemisphere or vice versa. So we know that globalization, on the scale of globalization, has shrunk communication and the movement of money and connected people on a much smaller scale than what we see on the size of the earth. Globalization is the large-scale adaptation to global scale phenomenon. Globalization is when we see the cultural landscape patterns of large multinational corporations like McDonald's that offer specific foods to reach the masses that fit a local preference. That's called globalization. Restaurants at McDonald's are found globally. They create a uniform landscape, as you can see with the golden arch. Some of the ways that you see globalization might be the McCurry pan found in India, or you might look at the salsa wrap found in Central America. So those are examples of globalization. The global economy, the main vehicle is transnational corporations. A synonym to transnational corporations is multinational corporations. The transnational corporations, they sell their products to many countries, not just within the formal boundaries of a country. And they also have headquarters that are located globally as well. They spread their message by communication and advanced technologies. So it, again, eliminates any time-space compression. In other words, time-space compression that would unite people from the United States to China, for instance. That message would happen almost instantaneous because of the advanced communication and technology that's in globalization. How do we know that we're in a globalized world? Well, the recession in 2008 was the first global recession coined by historians, and we know that because homeowners in the U.S. were affected, so were sales clerks in Japan, as a supporting example. All right, globalization of the economy. We can see a retailer. We can see that the multinational corporation of North Face has headquarters in California and headquarters in North Carolina. Then the manufacturing is managed from Hong Kong, and we can look at also the distribution arrangement of other distribution centers and manufacturing centers. Globalization of culture creates a uniform culture, so it creates a homogeneous culture. How do we know that? Because it's through material artifacts that are consumed, that are valued of a culture. Remember, going back to the basic of culture, what we take care of and how we take care of it. To take care of it is what we consume for material traits, which is one of the basic elements of culture. And we see the material artifacts consumed within like fast food industries or service stations, gas stations, or hotels or hospitality industries and other retail chains, such as we already saw with North Face, or it could be any tag that's on the back of your shirt right now. They have a visible appearance. Some of the pros of a uniform landscape of globalization, they produce a sense of familiarity for people traveling abroad. They enhance communication and the movement of money. One of the negatives, it destroys local diversity. And it also destroys local diversity by creating a placelessness, meaning you feel the uniform corporate brand everywhere around the world. One of the results to the loss of local diversity has been the increase of specialized local activities. So now local levels become more specialized in their services or in their manufacturing or in their communication. Here we see how McDonald's creates a sense of placelessness. Take a moment and answer the following questions. Make sure you understand what's been covered so far in the notes. And if I'm going too fast, again, you can access this Google slide in the Unit 1 presentation folder, or you can take a screenshot of the questions. All right, space. That's the physical gap between A and B. Absolute distance can be linear, so we're taking a look at distance from point A to B, the time it takes. This would be very prevalent in more developed countries. They don't think of necessarily distance, they think of it in time. In less developed countries, they look at more relative distance. It's not linear at all. It's more thinking of time and not distance whatsoever. All right, and then geographers think about arrangement of people and activities with distribution. So think of distribution as the arrangement, and spatial distribution is going to be how they're analyzing space and the activities of people and how it's arranged. We can look at space and inequality. We can look at half of the economic activity is clustered in urban areas, with the largest clustering in the Northeast. Spatial distribution, so the arrangement of features, can be broken down into three properties of distribution. The first is density, the frequency, how many times something appears in space. The three forms of density that we'll look at throughout the year are going to be arithmetic density, is the number of objects or people happening within a given amount of space. So the frequency of the object that happens in space. Physiological density is the number of people per arable land, so land you can harvest for crops. And then agriculture is going to be the number of farmers per land area. Concentration is the extent of spread. This expands to clustered and dispersed concentrations. So we're looking at the extent. Patterns are the arrangements. Linear commonly found as water features. Centralized, usually political decision. Geometric can be another political decision, like we'll talk about later in the notes today with the Land Ordinance of 1787. It created geometric grid patterns of cities found in the northeastern region of the early Americas. Rectangular can follow political decisions. It can be economic decisions, and random can be chaos. No really linear, no pattern really followed. All right, density. When we look at Georgia's density, 141 people per square mile. Is it a high density? We don't know. We need a comparative example. Always looking at densities, you need comparative examples. When you compare it to Ohio, no, they have a low arithmetic density. Ohio has almost nearly double the arithmetic density of Georgia. Meanwhile, Michigan, slightly higher. And then when you compare Georgia to New Jersey has a much higher arithmetic density. So the frequency of people in a given area of land is much greater than that of Georgia. But when you compare Georgia to Wyoming, then they have a very high arithmetic density. So you need a comparative example. We look at the distribution of desks within a classroom. We can see that the arrangement in the left is a rectangular. Well, the distribution, the arrangement is following a rectangular pattern. The density is much higher than the other desks arranged in the middle visual and the right visual. We can see that in the left visual, the density is much greater because it has 18 desks, and then to the right, neither one of those pictures have 18 desks, so it has a higher density, and the density is clustered, and the concentration is much greater. The density rate here is going to be lower arithmetic density. The distribution is going to be clustered, but it's going to be more centralized. And then we look at the arrangement of desks right here, and it's going to be a lower density, and the distribution is dispersed. And when we look at the concentration, it's going to be it's going to be concentrated through a chaos pattern. All right, let's take a look at this. Manhattan represents the place with the highest population density. So what form of density would we be looking at? Arithmetic, physiological, agriculture. If you said arithmetic, that is correct. Let's take a look at densities with the data and how they can be misrepresented in scales. So if we look at the map to the left, this gives us a small scale. It shows us the states of the Midwest. It doesn't show us accurate population distribution. We would assume that in the state of Illinois, they have a population scattered throughout Illinois or dispersed throughout Illinois that is between 124 people per square kilometer to 246 square kilometer. When we look at a large-scale map, such as Illinois and counties, we can see that really the population concentration is near the Chicago area, Cook County, which is the darkest, near Lake Michigan, where they have 1,280 people per square mile, or 494 people per square kilometer. Another way of using distribution of data is through spatial associations. We can look at places. We can look at Texas specifically, and when we look at Texas, we can look at the distribution of Baptists and Methodists in the north, and in the south, Catholic and Lutheran. And then we can take a look at the map to the right where we can see dry communities where alcohol is not consumed, and that shows us a spatial association. Dry counties, no alcohol consumption, relating to Baptists and Methodists. Whereas in the south, we can see a spatial association of Catholics and Lutherans, and alcoholic beverages are purchased or may be consumed. Another spatial association we look at when we see cancer rates, and we can see that cancer rates are near the Great Lakes in the southern regions. And then we can see that map, if you said, what map scale is that? Hopefully you said that's a small scale map. And then if we zoom in and we look at the map below, then we can zoom into a more large scale map of the state of Maryland, and we can see the distribution in Maryland is going to be near urban areas or along the Potomac River. And then if we zoom in even further to a large scale map to the right, we can see that Baltimore City has the highest cancer rates of that city compared to northern areas. All right, let's continue on. Connectivity, that's connecting people with between space, between places, ideas and objects. One there are two types of diffusion, relocation diffusion and expansion diffusion. Relocation diffusion is, think of migration, people moving. It's the physical movement of people from one place to the next, and with it they take luggage. What's their luggage? Their culture, what they take care of, and how they take care of it. That can be their language, their religion, their ethnicity. It can be other cultural elements, such as food preferences, etc. The second, expansion diffusion, is like a rapid snowball-like effect. It happens very fast, extremely fast. And there are four types of expansion diffusion. The first is hierarchical diffusion. This spreads through a person of authority or power, like a celebrity or a president. Those would be forms of hierarchical diffusion. Reverse hierarchical diffusion is when ideas spread. They spread away from urban areas to outside lying areas, small towns. An example of reverse hierarchical diffusion would be like Walmart. Contagious diffusion. This is spread between humans or population. An example would be the internet or social media. Or it could be a communicable disease such as COVID-19. The fourth form of expansion diffusion is stimulus diffusion. This is when you have an underlying principle and you build upon it. This could be seen in the generations of iPhones. Stimulus diffusion happens with, from iPhone 1 to iPhone 10. What kind of expansion diffusion is in this GIF? Surfing the internet. If you say contagious diffusion, you are correct. You can see the distribution and diffusion of tweets. What kind of diffusion would Twitter be? Social media, contagious diffusion again. Look at the distribution of baseball teams. We can see in the mid-1950s that the distribution was in the Northeast. Their density was highest in the Northeast, and it was clustered and it was concentrated, by major cities. In 2013, we can see that now the distribution is dispersed. We can see the density is still highest in the Northeast, but it's second highest in the Southwest because of major cities. And we can also see that the concentration in the West is different than the Northeast. Concentration is going to be along major cities where major ports were. The U.S. Land Ordinance of 1785 gave county or town grid systems. So they had a range of 6 miles by 6 miles. It gave 36 square miles, and it made up the states, as you can see in the map above. It gave several grid-like systems found in states of like Illinois, Ohio, Indiana, as well as parts of the western states. All right, and that takes us to the end of notes.